In studio with us to take a look at this visit, we do have Khayelihle Khumalo, who is on standby. Khayelihle, thank you so much for your time. Quite a lot the two presidents have really touched on as far as their visit. The visit is concerned. They start off, though, by being very much present to the events in the Middle East.
Well, absolutely, Bongo, especially because, I mean, these are BRICS members, and also we know that Iran is also a BRICS member, but also just the repercussions of this conflict, whether you're looking at, you know, the global supply of energy through the Strait of Hormuz, but also just the impact, a humanitarian crisis that may unfold, especially now as the death toll is rising, but also just how so many countries have been affected in the Gulf, where quite a lot of interceptions of missiles and many other weapons, a very, very terrible time in the world. But also we know that the two leaders that they've been calling for the dialogue not to be just, you know, just thrown out of the window, for diplomacy and de-escalation to prevail in this regard.
And when you then listen to the two of them, yes, they talk about diplomacy, but also the two are speaking about increasing trade, because President Cyril Ramaphosa is saying that the two countries are nowhere near where they're supposed to be when it comes to trading with one another.
Well, absolutely, Bongo, especially because, I mean, when you talk about South-South cooperation, South Africa, Brazil, you can also add India. I mean, they do have a trilateral forum through IPSA, but also they are part of BRICS, they are part of G20. So all these multilateral organizations, but also most importantly, I think the focus is really between South Africa and Brazil in terms of deepening of economic relations. I mean, you look at the massive delegation with the president. We do understand during the course of the state visit, he's also going to address South Africa-Brazil Business Forum, really just showing that when you talk about investment, it's absolutely key, Bongo, especially in this particular context where the two countries really were so those quite radical tariffs coming from the US. So South Africa and Brazil also being affected. So you also do have this really intensification of religious processes where they're looking at what can they do in terms of really deepening trade and making sure that they count on each other. I mean, you can really feel the warmth in the building between the two leaders where they talk about really so many things. I mean, you look at also the participation of South Africa through G20. It's quite a very unusual moment for South Africa, given the hostility between Pretoria and Washington, D.C. But also President Lula saying that it shouldn't be the case. In fact, South Africa is a founding member of G20, so it should be there in that seat in the U.S.
And when you speak about some of the issues, especially the warmth in the room, both countries admitting that they've got a lot to learn as far as working with each other is concerned, and saying that they want to learn best practices with each other. Agribusiness is one of the areas where Brazil is in fact strong, and it's interesting that we hear from President Lula that the animal health is going to be quite important as they're going to be talking. And this as South Africa is battling the foot and mouth disease crisis.
Well, absolutely, Bonga, especially because South Africa will always count in its partners abroad in terms of making sure that, for example, the vaccines are given to all the districts and all the locations across the country. But also, most importantly, when you talk about agriculture, Brazil is one of the key, you know, just players in this regard. But also, we do know with South Africa, it's a fairly quite well-established industry, but also whether you're talking about issues of tourism, we saw the SAA, you know, just reopening that route in Brazil in terms of making sure that tourism is promoted. Prior to the engagement by the leaders, we saw that agreement being signed by the ministers of tourism. So to show that South Africa and Brazil really are keen to work together, especially now, Bongo, where quite a lot is happening in the world, but also really just seeing the reaffirmation between Pretoria and Brasilia that they're really keen to work together. You know, listening to President Lula saying that, look, we're just neighbors. We can just stand across the oceans and greet each other.
From our balcony. Yes, and that was quite the moment, Khayelihle. And then as you speak about this business forum, then the president comes back tomorrow. But what is going to be important here is what the president had to say that whatever agreements are being made right now and commitments, they actually must translate to even more going forward.
Well, absolutely, Bonga. I think that's always a massive challenge with these state visits where a litany of commitments are made, but in terms of the follow-up mechanisms, how do you ensure, for example, if you talk about, relations and also the investments in a certain area. So how do you really just make sure that those mechanisms are in place in terms of monitoring the short term, the medium term, but also the long-term impact as well? But also a very critical moment for these two countries, especially because where you look at where they are positioned, in terms of their respective continents in Latin America, Brazil is a very influential economy, but also by the very same token, South Africa remains quite a very industrialized economy in sub-Saharan Africa, but also very interesting issues, Bongo, around the cultural exchanges and also people-to-people contact, where we know that when you talk about the largest black population outside of the African continent, you find them in Brazil through a number of programs. I mean, we've seen the Minister of Arts and Culture and Sport is there as well in terms of cementing those ties and making sure that we really just remove some of the barriers at times that impede progress.
From the streets of London to the office. Thank you so much, Khayelihle Khumalo. Appreciate your time. My colleague there, Khayelihle Khumalo, speaking to us about the address there by the President of South Africa, that's Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as the President of Brazil, Lula da Silva.